My brother made me sit alone at the gallery at his birthday while he soaked up all the attention, as usual. It was the same story every time. Dennis was always the golden child, the one who everyone adored, while I was just there, quiet, unnoticed, pushed to the back, and this time was no different. While my brother basked in the spotlight, I was relegated to the sidelines literally. But that night, something unexpected happened. A stranger, Max, took my hand and whispered in my ear, "You shouldn't be sitting here alone." And just like that, my world shifted. Max really saw me, and in a single moment, everything changed. Little did I know, this one encounter would be the turning point that changed my entire life. Max's words lingered in my mind long after he'd taken my hand. I couldn't explain it, but something about his presence made me feel like I wasn't invisible anymore. It was the first time in years that I had felt seen not just by a stranger, but by someone who truly noticed me. I had spent my entire life in the shadow of my brother, Dennis, always pushed to the side at family events, and never fully acknowledged by my parents. But Max, with his quiet confidence, had given me a glimpse of something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. For once, I didn't feel like an afterthought. And it wasn't just about being with him, it was about how he made me feel about myself. But I wasn't ready to admit it to myself yet. Not completely. I wasn't sure if this was just a fluke, or if I had finally met someone who could see beyond the walls I had built to protect myself from rejection. As the party went on, the hollow ache of being left out returned. I glanced over at Dennis, still the center of attention, surrounded by relatives, smiling and laughing with everyone, as if I didn't exist. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't paying attention to him anymore. My thoughts were occupied by Max and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I could be more than the person my family always overlooked. The evening carried on, but my mind was elsewhere. Max didn't just let me sit in the gallery quietly, unnoticed. He pulled me into conversation and made me laugh, pointing out little details about the guests at the party, teasing me about my family's attempts at making small talk. We started talking about everything and nothing: his background, my career, the oddities of family dynamics. He didn't ask about Dennis or my sister, Kate. He didn't care about what they were doing or who they were impressing. He was interested in me, which felt almost foreign. As the night wore on, I noticed something else. I was slowly letting go of the tension I had carried all evening. For the first time, I didn't feel the weight of being the overlooked sibling. Max wasn't treating me like I was less important than Dennis, or like I had to earn my place in the conversation. With him, I was just me. And somehow, that felt refreshing. Eventually, the music played louder, and more guests mingled around the room, creating a buzz of conversations. Max and I stepped outside to the garden for some air, and as we walked through the quiet path, I realized I had been holding back for so long. Not just around my family, but in every aspect of my life. I'd become accustomed to being the quiet, obedient sister, the one who would never challenge the status quo. But Max made me realize something. I didn't have to stay in the shadows. I had spent years building my career, but never had the confidence to truly step into the light. I had always let my family's expectations and dismissals cloud my path. But Max, he didn't know any of that. He saw something different in me, and, for the first time, I saw it too. I was more than what they had made me feel I was. "So," Max said, breaking through my thoughts, "you're a venture capitalist, huh? That sounds pretty intense." I laughed, lightly, almost embarrassed at how much I had bottled up. "I guess it can be," I replied. "But I've always loved the idea of helping new ideas grow. It's what excites me, the potential." Max turned to face me, his expression sincere. "You know, I don't think I've met anyone like you in a long time. You're not just someone following the rules, you're someone making your own. It's not easy in your line of work, right?" The compliment took me by surprise. No one had ever spoken to me like that before, especially not after years of being in the background. "I suppose not," I said, trying to sound modest, though the words felt good coming out of my mouth. "It's not easy, but it's something I love. I've made some great investments, some successful ones." Max's smile widened, and for a brief second, I could see a spark of admiration in his eyes. "I can tell, and I think that's the problem. You're too humble about it. Don't be afraid to own your success, Nora. You deserve it." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so conditioned to play small, to shrink back into the background, to always be quiet and patient. But Max's simple encouragement made me realize that I had been holding myself back from truly embracing my worth, I had been waiting for someone to validate me when all along, I had everything I needed within me. Max's influence was already starting to change me. I didn't need to hide anymore. I didn't need to wait for approval. This was my life, and I was ready to take charge of it. As we walked back to the party, I made a decision. I was going to take a hard look at my career, my goals, and everything that had been standing in my way. No more waiting, no more hiding, and maybe, just maybe, I was ready to step into the spotlight and take my rightful place. After the party, I couldn't stop thinking about Max. His words, "Don't be afraid to own your success," echoed in my mind long after we said goodbye. It was the first time in a long while that someone had truly seen me, not for the family I came from or the role I'd been assigned, but for what I had the potential to be. Max's quiet confidence gave me a spark of hope I didn't know I was missing, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my own hesitation. I had always wanted more. I loved being a venture capitalist, helping startups grow, shaping ideas into reality. But somewhere along the way, I had stopped believing I could make a real difference. I let my family's dismissals and the shadow of Dennis's success cloud my vision. But now, with Max's words still in my head, I could feel something shifting. It was time to take that first step, no more hiding in the background. No more waiting for someone else to give me permission to succeed. I had to make it happen for myself. That evening, after a long day of sorting through emails, I sat down at my desk and started researching. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of where to start, but the drive to prove myself overpowered my doubts. I dove into looking for potential investment startups that could use my expertise. I scrolled through business plans, pitched ideas, and reached out to companies I thought had promise. My heart raced as I sent off my first few emails. Would they take me seriously? I was still haunted by the feeling that, no matter how much I achieved, I'd always be seen as just Dennis's sister or Kate's quiet sibling. But I couldn't let that stop me. I thought about Max again, how he looked at me like I had potential. I wanted that. To be seen as someone who could take charge of her own future. I pushed aside my fears, focusing on the people who believed in me and the opportunities I knew I could seize if I let myself try. The first few weeks were full of small steps, each one giving me a bit more confidence. I began pushing myself to network more actively, reaching out to people I had been too intimidated to approach before. One evening, I took the leap and sent an email to a potential client I had admired for years. I didn't expect a reply, but to my surprise, I got an email back the next day, inviting me to a meeting to discuss an investment opportunity. I was both thrilled and terrified. The meeting was nerve-wracking. I walked into the glass and steel building of one of the most well-known tech companies in the city, my palms sweaty and my mind racing with self-doubt. Would they laugh me out of the room? Would they see me as the insecure, overlooked daughter of a family that never believed in me? But as I sat down across from the CEO, I reminded myself of Max's words, "Own your success." I had been working in the shadows for too long, but now, I was ready to shine. The pitch went well. I spoke with confidence I didn't know I had, offering insights and strategies that showed I was more than just a financial backer. I was someone who truly understood the industry. By the end of the meeting, they agreed to bring me on board. It was a small victory, but for me, it felt huge. It was proof that I could do this on my own terms, that I wasn't just another passive figure in the background. The next few months brought more opportunities, more meetings, and more small wins. I landed another deal with a promising startup and received praise for my instincts in recognizing a potential market shift. Each victory, no matter how small, made me feel more capable. But just as quickly as the successes came, my insecurities crept in. I still couldn't shake the feeling that my family was watching from the sidelines, waiting for me to fail. Every time my mom mentioned Dennis's latest project, or when Kate casually asked how my little investments were going, I felt the weight of their disregard all over again. I wanted them to see me, to acknowledge that I had more to offer than just being their second-choice child. But with each passing day, I realized something important. I didn't need them to validate me. I was doing this for myself. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I came across a post from Kate. It was a picture of the family at a charity event, Dennis looking every bit the charming, successful son, with everyone gathered around him, as usual. For a moment, I felt that familiar pang of being overlooked. But this time, something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to let their expectations define me anymore. I wasn't going to shrink back into the shadows when I had so much more to give. I closed my laptop and picked up the phone. It was time to make the call. I had been putting off the one I knew would change everything. The days after the birthday party felt like a blur of constant reflection. Max's words echoed in my mind, pushing me to stop hiding, to stop being afraid of stepping out of the shadows. It wasn't just about gaining recognition anymore, it was about believing in myself. That belief was something I hadn't realized I was missing. But now, with each new day, it became clearer. One Tuesday afternoon, I received a business proposal that caught my attention, an investment opportunity with a promising startup in the sustainable tech industry. The company was young, but its vision aligned with my values, developing eco-friendly solutions that could revolutionize urban living. On paper, it was exactly the kind of opportunity I had been hoping to find. It checked all the boxes: innovative, meaningful, and profitable. But there was a catch. I didn't feel ready. My gut churned as I read the proposal. The startup had potential, no doubt, but it was risky. They needed someone with experience in scaling investments and bringing fresh ideas to the market, someone with a proven track record. And that, I realized, wasn't me. At least, not yet. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the document in front of me. My mind was flooded with doubts. What if I failed? What if I was making a mistake? Could I really pull this off? But then I remembered something. I remembered Max's words. He'd seen something in me, something I had yet to fully see in myself. And suddenly, I couldn't let fear dictate my future. I had spent my whole life waiting for someone to tell me I was good enough. For the first time, I realized that I didn't need anyone's validation to make this happen. I had everything I needed right in front of me, an opportunity that could change the course of my career. With a deep breath, I picked up the phone and made the call. I was going to take the plunge. Over the next few days, I immersed myself in everything about the startup. I researched the company's founders, their mission, and the market they were targeting. Every new piece of information made me more convinced that this was the right move. I started reaching out to my network, scheduling meetings with industry experts, and talking to other investors who had experience in the tech space. I was pushing myself harder than ever before, trying to make sure I didn't miss a single detail. But it wasn't easy. Every conversation brought new challenges, questions I didn't have immediate answers to, doubts I hadn't anticipated. At times, I felt like I was in over my head, like I was playing a game I wasn't fully equipped to win. I still struggled with that nagging feeling of inadequacy, wondering if I was really capable of seeing this through. But each time I faced a new obstacle, something inside me clicked. It was like I was building a muscle, strengthening my confidence with each hurdle I overcame. I had always been afraid of failure, of not being good enough. But I realized that failure wasn't the worst thing that could happen. The worst thing was never trying. And for once in my life, I was ready to try. Weeks passed, and the momentum I was building started to pay off. The investment I had made in the startup began to gain traction, with the company securing its first major client and growing its customer base. The news spread quickly in the industry, and soon, I was receiving calls and emails from other investors who wanted to know more about the project. For the first time in my career, I was the one people were seeking out, not the one waiting for opportunities to come my way. It felt good, no great. As I walked into a high-profile business event one evening, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. I was mingling with the kind of people I had once only dreamed of being on the same level as. Executives, investors, and innovators who once seemed untouchable were now treating me like an equal. My network had grown exponentially, and I was beginning to get recognized for the value I brought to the table. But the best part? I no longer felt like I had to prove myself. I wasn't trying to convince anyone that I belonged. I knew I did. The real turning point came when I was asked to speak at an industry panel on venture capital investments. I was hesitant at first, still fighting that feeling of imposter syndrome, but this time, I knew it was my moment to show up for myself. Standing in front of an audience of industry leaders, I shared my journey from feeling invisible and undervalued to taking risks and finding success. It wasn't just about the numbers or the companies I had invested in. It was about the personal growth I had undergone, the realization that I could no longer let fear hold me back. When the event ended, people came up to me to shake my hand, offering congratulations and asking for my advice. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for validation, I was offering it. I was owning my journey, and that felt like the greatest success of all. As I drove home that night, the city lights twinkling around me, I realized something. I had finally stopped seeking validation from my family, from anyone. I had become my own validation. This wasn't just a career achievement. This was me embracing my potential and walking into the future I had once been too scared to reach for. It wasn't long before the news of my recent success spread to the family. The venture I had backed, the startup that had begun to flourish under my guidance, caught the attention of the business community. Within weeks, my name appeared in several industry articles, and my phone rang more than ever with offers and opportunities. For the first time, I felt like I was becoming the person I had always wanted to be, a respected professional, not defined by anyone else's expectations. But as the news reached my family, I wasn't sure how to feel. The reactions were surprising, to say the least. It was a Sunday afternoon when I got the call from my mom. I had just finished another meeting with a potential investor and was relaxing at home when my phone buzzed. The number on the screen was familiar, my mom. "Hello, sweetie," she said, her voice chipper but strained. "I saw that article on your latest investment. It's great, I guess. But I just don't want you getting your hopes up too high. These things, they can be unpredictable. You should still be careful." I stared at the phone in my hand, incredulous. It was the same old story, her attempt to downplay any success I had. She wasn't angry, but she wasn't proud either. It was as if she was scared to let herself be too happy for me, perhaps because it would mean acknowledging that I had achieved something on my own, without their help, without Dennis's constant presence in the limelight. "Thanks, Mom," I said, my voice tight with restrained frustration. "But I'm confident in what I'm doing. I've worked hard to get here. You don't need to worry." She paused for a moment, but I could hear the discomfort in her voice. "Well, I just think, you've always been so independent. It's just unexpected. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to." The conversation ended with my mother offering the same half-hearted congratulations she always did when something positive happened to me, just enough to sound polite, but never enough to feel like she truly saw me. Later that day, I ran into Dennis at a family gathering. I hadn't planned to go, but my mom had insisted, and despite my growing sense of independence, I still found myself showing up. It wasn't long before I regretted that decision. Dennis, with his usual self-assured air, was in the middle of talking to some distant relatives, casually mentioning how lucky I was to land such a good deal. "Yeah, Nora's doing well. She's always been a bit of a wild card. I guess it's working out for her now," he said, his tone dripping with that condescending familiarity. "She's always got these ideas. I'm just glad it's working for her." I wanted to respond, to say something that would make him understand how much that felt like a backhanded compliment, but I held myself back. Instead, I nodded tightly and walked away. It was clear that Dennis wasn't impressed, not really. He saw my success as some fluke, a moment of good luck, rather than something I had fought tooth and nail for. I could feel the weight of his dismissiveness, just as I always had, and I realized something in that moment. I wasn't going to let it slide anymore. Not this time. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about how much I had changed. I had spent so much time trying to make my family proud, trying to prove myself to them, but I had never received the validation I craved. Every time I achieved something, it felt like they looked the other way, or worse, minimized it. They never truly saw me for who I was, only for the role I played in their narrative. The overlooked daughter, the one who was always behind the scenes. But tonight, as I replayed the words my mom had said, and how Dennis had casually dismissed me, something inside me snapped. I was tired of feeling invisible, tired of being the quiet sister, the one who had to prove herself over and over again just to get a moment of acknowledgement. The following weekend, I decided to confront my family. I was done with the silent treatment, done with being passed over in favor of Dennis's ever-growing list of accomplishments. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I had earned my place, and it was time for them to realize that. We sat down for dinner, the usual routine, Dennis doing most of the talking, my mom quietly listening, and me quietly picking at my food. As always, my presence barely seemed to matter, but this time, I wouldn't let it slide. I looked across the table, meeting my mother's eyes first. "Mom, Dennis," I began, my voice steady but firm. "I need to talk to you both. I'm tired of pretending like I'm invisible. Every time something good happens in my life, you both brush it off like it's no big deal, and I'm done with that." Dennis raised an eyebrow, clearly unprepared for me to speak up. He gave me a quick, dismissive smile. "What's the matter, Nora? You're doing well. It's nothing to get upset about." But I wasn't backing down. "You don't get it, Dennis. This isn't just good luck or a fluke. I've worked my ass off for everything I have. I've put in hours, taken risks, and made sacrifices to get where I am today. I'm not just some afterthought in this family. I've earned my place. My mother opened her mouth, probably to try and de-escalate things, but I wasn't done. I turned to her. And you, Mom. I'm tired of you downplaying everything I do. I don't need your half-hearted congratulations. I don't need you to worry about me or offer backhanded advice. I've made it on my own, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. The silence at the table was deafening. I could see the shock on my mom's face and the disbelief on Dennis's. But this time, I didn't feel like shrinking back. I had finally said what needed to be said. The email came in late one afternoon, while I was sipping my coffee in the office, feeling a rare moment of calm. I almost didn't open it, thinking it was just another one of those generic event invitations. But when I saw the subject line, "Invitation to speak at the Venture Capital Leaders Summit," my heart skipped a beat. I stared at the screen, not sure if I was reading it right. This wasn't just an invitation to attend the event. This was an invitation to speak, to share my story on stage in front of some of the biggest names in the venture capital world. The realization hit me all at once. This was the recognition I had worked for, the validation I'd been silently craving. I wasn't just a passive observer anymore. I wasn't the invisible sister, quietly hidden behind my family's shadows. I was being asked to speak at a prestigious event because I had earned it. I took a deep breath, reading the email over again. My heart raced with excitement, but there was an unmistakable feeling of dread too. Speaking in front of a large audience had always terrified me. The anxiety crept up my spine as I pictured myself standing on stage, with all those eyes on me. Could I do it? Was I really ready? But then I thought about everything I had overcome. Every moment of self-doubt, every time I'd been dismissed by my family, every risk I'd taken on my own. Max's words from that night at Kate's birthday party came flooding back. Don't be afraid to own your success. Maybe this was the moment where I finally did just that. The days leading up to the conference were a whirlwind of preparation. My mind was consumed with every detail, crafting the perfect speech, rehearsing in front of a mirror, obsessing over every word. I knew I had to share my story, but how much of it could I really reveal? My journey hadn't been easy, and there were parts I was still unsure about. But as I stood in front of the mirror one night, practicing my lines, I realized something. I didn't need to hide anymore. I had spent years trying to make my family proud, but they never truly saw me. They never truly understood what I had accomplished. This speech wasn't for them. It was for me. It was for every moment I had fought for myself, every step I had taken without their support, every risk I had made that paid off. It was time for me to stand tall and own what I had achieved. The day of the conference arrived, and as I walked into the grand ballroom, I couldn't help but feel a rush of both nerves and excitement. The event was a gathering of industry leaders, influencers, and investors, many of whom I had admired from afar for years. I felt like an outsider stepping into a world that I had only dreamed of being a part of. I sat in the green room, listening to the other speakers, their confidence palpable. I couldn't help but wonder if I truly belonged in this room, with these heavy hitters. But when my name was called, my legs moved before I even had the chance to think about it. As I walked up to the stage, the spotlight hit me, and I felt a wave of nervousness wash over me. My mind went blank for a moment, but then I remembered something. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me. I took a deep breath and began my speech. As I stood there on stage, the applause ringing in my ears, I felt something I had never experienced before: pride in myself. This wasn't just a speech. This was my story, my journey, and it wasn't about the family who had overlooked me or the people who had doubted me. It was about me, the woman who had fought to get here, who had earned every ounce of success. When the applause finally died down, I stepped off the stage and into the waiting arms of a few industry leaders who congratulated me. But even more important than their praise was the feeling inside me. I had done this on my own. I had earned this moment, and no one could ever take it from me. Later that evening, after the conference, I sat in my hotel room, reflecting on everything that had happened. For so long, I had been running from the approval of my family, trying to prove I was worthy of their recognition. But as I looked out the window at the city lights below, I realized something important. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built my success from the ground up, and now I was living it. This was just the beginning, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be. I hadn't planned on confronting them. After all, What good would it do? But after everything, after the speech, the recognition, the success that I had worked so hard for, the nagging, familiar ache of being overlooked by my family returned. My mom, Kate, and Dennis, no matter how much I achieved, they still couldn't see me for who I was. They saw Dennis's accolades, Kate's charm, and me. I was just the quiet one in the background, waiting for my moment that never came. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't going to wait for them to notice me. I was going to make sure they heard me, loud and clear. The dinner was typical: too much food, too much small talk, and the same old routine. Dennis had just returned from a business trip, and Kate was holding court, as usual. My mother sat at the head of the table, nodding along to whatever conversation was dominating the room, occasionally casting a glance my way, though it wasn't with any real interest. "Dennis, you must tell us about the trip." Mom was practically gushing. "I'm sure it was so productive. I bet you learned so much." Dennis smiled, that smug, confident smile of his, brushing his hair back. "Oh, just the usual. More meetings, more networking, but it's all coming together. I think the next few months will be big for me." I felt my jaw tighten. The same smug tone, the same casual mentions of his endless victories. It was always Dennis. Always. Never me. But I couldn't hold it in anymore. Not tonight. I stood up abruptly, pushing my chair back. Everyone turned to look at me. My heart raced, but I couldn't stop now. The words had been building inside me for so long, and they were ready to spill out. "I'm glad things are going well for you, Dennis," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But maybe we should talk about something else for a minute. Because it seems like we've been talking about you for years, but never about me." There was a long, awkward silence. Dennis's confident smile faltered slightly, and Kate gave me a look like she wasn't sure if I was joking. "What do you mean, Nora?" Kate asked, clearly trying to avoid what was about to unfold. I continued, "I'm sick of always being the one who's ignored. I'm tired of being the second choice, of being the afterthought. I've spent my whole life, working hard, making things happen on my own, and yet, I've always been overlooked in favor of Dennis, or Kate, or whoever else you're interested in at the moment." Dennis scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "Oh, come on, Nora. You've always had your own thing going. You're doing just fine." I could feel the old, familiar feeling rising in my chest, frustration, resentment, but I held it in check. "No, Dennis, that's not the point. I've worked my ass off, and all I've ever gotten from you two is indifference. You think I don't notice? You think I don't see how you only talk to me when it's convenient or when you need something?" Kate glanced nervously at Mom, who looked down at her plate, clearly uncomfortable. I turned my gaze to her, locking eyes. "And you, Mom," I said, my voice softer but no less firm. "You've always dismissed my achievements. Always. I built my career on my own, and it's like you can't even bring yourself to be proud of me." My mom finally looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "Nora, No," I interrupted, holding up my hand. "I don't want to hear any more excuses. You've always been so proud of Dennis, so proud of Kate. But when it comes to me, it's like I don't even exist. I'm just a footnote in your life, something you don't even notice unless it's convenient for you." The tension in the room was suffocating. Dennis shifted uncomfortably in his chair, and Kate, for once, was quiet. But I couldn't stop now. I had come this far, and I wasn't backing down. "I don't need your approval anymore. I'm not asking for it. I'm not waiting for it," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I've done this on my own, and I'm damn proud of what I've achieved. I'm not the invisible sister anymore, and I'm not going to let you keep treating me like I am." For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. This was no longer about seeking validation from them. This was about me, about owning who I was and the life I had built. There was a long, tense pause as my words hung in the air. Dennis's face was unreadable, and Kate still seemed uncertain of how to react. But it wasn't their reaction that mattered anymore. It was mine. Mom finally cleared her throat, shifting in her seat. I didn't realize you felt that way, Nora," she said, her voice shaky. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I didn't mean to downplay your achievements." I shook my head. "It's not just about achievements. It's about seeing me. It's about realizing that I'm not invisible, and I'm not here just to support Dennis or Kate. I'm here for myself. I've spent so many years waiting for your approval, and now I see that I never needed it. I've done everything on my own, and I'm proud of it." Dennis opened his mouth, as if to respond, but then closed it again, likely realizing there was no point in trying to brush off my feelings anymore. Mom looked at me, and I could see a flicker of something in her eyes, something close to regret. "I'm sorry, Nora," she said quietly. "I wish I had been more present for you." I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the years of neglect begin to lift. It wasn't the perfect apology I had wanted, but it was enough. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was fighting for their attention. I didn't need their validation to know that I had succeeded. "I'm done trying to prove myself to you," I said, standing up from the table. "I've already proved everything I need to prove to myself." There was a moment, just before the startup I had invested in went public, when everything seemed to slow down. The weeks leading up to this moment had been filled with stress, negotiations, late-night calls, and endless spreadsheets. But the company was finally ready to make its move. The decision was made, the paperwork was signed, and the startup was about to be listed on the stock exchange. I sat at my desk in my apartment, staring at the computer screen where the final documents were being finalized. It was happening. This was the culmination of everything I had worked for. A public offering that not only validated my business acumen but also confirmed that I was no longer just Dennis's sister, or the overlooked daughter in my family. This moment wasn't just about financial success. It was a testament to everything I had built on my own without their support, without anyone holding my hand, and without any of the recognition I had been chasing for so long. It was my success, and I had earned it. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was my lawyer, confirming that the paperwork had gone through. "Nora, it's official. The offering has been filed. You did it." I couldn't help but smile. It felt surreal. For so many years, I had doubted my ability to make it in a world that was dominated by people who had always been ahead of me. I had watched my brother and sister get all the accolades, all the attention, while I worked quietly in the background, hoping for a moment like this. But now, the moment had arrived and I was the one calling the shots. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing something just to prove I was good enough. I had reached the pinnacle of my career, but more importantly, I had reached the pinnacle of who I was meant to be. As I walked into the office the next morning, the world felt different. The usual hum of activity seemed more vibrant, more alive. People were coming up to congratulate me, fellow investors, industry leaders, and even a few of the executives from the startup. I was no longer the outsider, the underdog. I was now one of them, respected and acknowledged for the work I had put in. But it wasn't just about the recognition. It was about the freedom to define my path, to live life on my own terms, without worrying about whether I was ever going to be accepted by my family. For so long I had been seeking their approval, but now I finally understood that I didn't need it. I had created something of my own, and for the first time, I felt a profound sense of peace. It wasn't until later that evening, when I sat down at my apartment with a glass of wine, that I took a moment to reflect on how far I had come. My phone buzzed with messages, and as I checked them, I saw one from my mom. "Hi, sweetie. I saw the announcement. I just wanted to say I'm so proud of you. You've worked so hard, and I hope you know how much that means to us." I didn't immediately respond. Instead, I let the words sink in. It wasn't the grand gesture I had hoped for, but it was enough. My mom had finally seen me, truly seen me, and for the first time, I realized that I didn't need anything more from her. I put my phone down and gazed out the window at the city below. The lights twinkled like a reflection of the future I had built. I was no longer the invisible sister, the one who was always overlooked. I had created my own identity, my own space in the world, and no one could take that away from me. I thought back to that night at Kate's birthday party, when Max had taken my hand and told me not to hide. It had been the catalyst for everything. His belief in me had sparked the change I needed. But it wasn't just Max's words, it was the quiet strength I had found within myself. I had learned to trust in my own instincts, to step into the light and own my success, no matter who else was there or who wasn't. This was my moment. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone else to give me permission to celebrate it. I stood by the window in my apartment, the city lights twinkling like 1,000 possibilities. The world outside felt vibrant, alive, and full of promise, just like I did. Everything had shifted. The woman who had once been the invisible sister, the overlooked daughter, was now standing at the helm of her own destiny. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The journey I'd taken felt like a lifetime. From being relegated to the back of the room at Kate's birthday party to becoming a recognized name in the venture capital world, I had fought every step of the way. But now, as I stood here looking out over the skyline, I realized that I was no longer constrained by my past or by my family's expectations. I had carved my own path, built my own success, and finally learned to trust in myself. There had been so many moments along the way when I questioned whether I was truly capable of doing this, whether I deserved to take up space in a world that seemed determined to push me to the sidelines. There were the years of doubt, the constant feeling of being second best, and the nagging belief that I had to prove myself over and over again. But somewhere along the journey, that changed. I stopped waiting for my family's validation, stopped seeking approval from anyone who didn't see my worth. I remembered the day I decided to step up and claim my success. The day I made the call to invest in that startup when I finally said, "This is it. This is my moment." It was a moment of clarity, a moment that forever changed the way I saw myself. That was when the real Nora emerged. The journey hadn't been easy. There were failures, doubts, and moments when I questioned everything, but each of those obstacles had shaped me, strengthened me, and built the woman I had become. I had learned to rely on my own instincts, to trust my decisions, and to never let fear hold me back. It wasn't about anyone else's approval anymore. It was about living for me, and that was the freedom I had fought for all along. Looking back, I saw how much I had grown. The old me would have spent years trying to win my family's approval, seeking their praise, quietly suffering in the background while Dennis and Kate were in the spotlight. But now, I had learned the hard way that their validation wasn't necessary. They would never understand my journey completely, and that was okay. It was freeing, in a way, to finally accept that I didn't need them to validate my success. I was proud of what I had done, and I no longer needed anyone else's stamp of approval. My relationship with my family had shifted. I had finally found the courage to speak up for myself, to assert my worth, and to refuse to be overlooked anymore. I had confronted them, told them how I felt, and allowed myself to stop chasing their recognition. They had seen me, and that was enough. I was no longer waiting for them to catch up. I was moving forward, carving my own path. As the days passed, I found myself setting new goals for both my personal and professional life. In the past, I had always been focused on climbing the ladder, on securing more deals, on proving that I belonged. But now, the goals I set for myself weren't just about success in the business world. They were about creating balance in my life, about building meaningful connections, pursuing passions outside of work, and learning how to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I had built a career, but now I wanted to build a life that wasn't solely defined by my achievements. I wanted to embrace my own freedom, not just from my family's expectations, but from the pressure I had placed on myself to constantly prove I was enough. I began exploring new opportunities, not just in business, but in personal growth. I took up yoga, spent time with friends I hadn't seen in years, and even started volunteering for causes I cared deeply about. It wasn't about taking a step back, it was about expanding my horizons, about allowing myself to grow in ways I had never considered before. My career was thriving, yes, but now I was making sure I took time for the things that made me feel whole. I had learned the hard way that life wasn't just about the next deal, the next investment, or the next win. It was about enjoying the ride, appreciating the journey, and knowing that I had the power to define it all. As I made my way through this new chapter of my life, I could feel the confidence and empowerment radiating from within me. I was no longer that quiet girl in the back of the room, waiting for someone to notice her. I had stepped into the light and claimed my place in the world. My family may have never fully understood my journey, but I no longer needed them to. I was living for myself now, not for their approval. And as I thought about the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. The best was yet to come. The possibilities felt endless. I stood up from my desk, walked over to the window, and looked out at the city below. The world was wide open, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The weight of the past was gone. I wasn't carrying it anymore. The future was mine to create,